Hello and welcome to Breaking Ground on iProperty Radio with myself, Carol Tallon. Today we're coming to you from KORE Retrofit HQ in Cavan, and I'm delighted to be joined by Barry McCarron, Managing Director of KORE Retrofit. Barry, thank you so much for welcoming us into KORE Retrofit HQ. I've forgotten what the country roads around Cavan are like.
Very good. So I'm based in Monaghan, Carol. So it's a journey that I know all too well with the bumps and the way over here. So you're very welcome. You're very welcome, KORE Retrofit.
Well, I was really keen to sit down and talk to you because we worked together at an event last year on rural homes, and I think one of the points that was made on that day was that after a full day of talking about rural homes that touched on retrofit and a whole load of other issues, I certainly felt we were leaving with more questions than we had answers. And now, nearly 12 months on, I feel like there's potentially even more confusion around retrofit. So let's go back a step, and for anybody who's not familiar, maybe talk to us about the work that KORE Retrofit does.
Yeah, so more than happy to give you an overview. So KORE Retrofit is one arm of two. We have the KORE Group, and the other side of the business is KORE Insulation, and they're a manufacturer of insulation, primarily EPS insulation. And then of course KORE Retrofit's the other arm, and that's where we are here. So what we're one of the very first actual one-stop shop under the SEAI banner, and very active and playing a leading role with retrofitting as we have it here in Ireland at the moment. And very typically what we're seeing in our marketplace is well, you've always got the wide spectrum of anyone and everyone doing retrofit, but more and more it seems to be that you've got the newbies, the people who are just married, just starting out, and with the vacant derelict grant that's available at the moment, combined with maybe the one-stop shop measures, we're getting that customer, that person, and why that might be our primary customer is because we offer a fabric first sort of solution to retrofit. So out there in Ireland at the moment, you can go via a technology retrofit solution, which would be solar, PV, battery, i.e. the technology side of it. And then you might have less invasive measures to the home's fabric. Whereas in KORE Retrofit, we were fabric first. So we would be dealing with insulation, floors, walls, roof, bringing down the energy demand, and then introducing renewable measures.
There's a lot wrapped up in that, Barry, so I'm going to break it down a little bit. First of all, when you say a one-stop shop, what do you mean? So what exactly do you offer?
Yeah, so it really is, as it says on the tin, really a one-stop shop. So if you come to KORE Retrofit, all the grants from the SEAI can come through a one-stop shop. So it means that for the homeowner...
Do you help people with those applications?
Exactly, we do, yeah. And also the vacant derelict homes as well, we can help in all of that process as well. So it's just that one touch point for a customer. And for us as well, we can also, let's say, embrace their contractor, the customer's contractor, if they're, particular about who does the work, or we can get them a contractor if they're not interested in really being really close to the project, or taking that deep role in the project. So either way, we can offer both sides of that solution. Yeah.
And I know you've touched on it there, just in your introduction, but I'm really interested to know who is retrofitting at the moment. So across your customer base, would it be mainly people who are buying homes that require work, or are these homeowners who are sitting in their home and needing advice as to how to future-proof those homes?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. I would say like a 60-40, 70-30 type thing, where the 70 or the 60% is typically somebody who's just buying a home and they're really starting into that process, as I said, with the vacant derelict. So it's really worth maybe underlining this point. So certain people in the right situation at the right time are able to avail of a 50,000 grant from the government for a vacant home. And if that home's also derelict, they're getting 20,000 on top. And then with the one-stop shop measures, they can get up to 33,000. So if they're doing a really deep retrofit to that new home that they've just bought, and if the vacant derelict, they're getting 103,000 in support. And
can you break down how that works though? Because again, one of the things that we see when we share across iProperty Radio, we share homes that are for sale, that might potentially qualify for the vacant and derelict homes grant. And there's always confusion as to which comes first and in what order? So for example, for people who are getting a mortgage, does the mortgage take into consideration the likely grants, or do people need to have the money in advance and then draw it down afterwards? So in practical steps, how can people make the scheme workable?
Yeah, so there's a big point to make in this. And what very often happens is too, this gets misunderstood, and it's been recently misunderstood in the media, is that for the homeowner, for the client, it's net of grant. So if the homeowner is, let's say the overall project, just for simplicity's sake, is going to be 200,000, and they're getting 103,000 in support, then it's 97,000 that's owed, and that's the money that they need to cover. With and another thing that's maybe not often spoken about is that there's a home energy upgrade loan available with a lot of the pillar institutions in Ireland. So that's up to 75,000 at a rate of about 3%. So people can use that as well as a lever.
Would that be more likely for existing homeowners as opposed to somebody who's getting their first mortgage for the first time?
Yeah, that's right. So it is typically in that situation, but I don't think it's excluded in that as well. So so all of these measures that are available, that's typically our clientele, and they're coming, engaging with us in all of this. We have an excellent team here, and they walk people through the various permutations and scenarios that can crop up, and almost there's always a different one and a new one that will present itself. But very successful at the moment. We seem to be growing now at the moment, and because these measures and supports have been available now for a period of time, I think it's fair to say the traction's there and it's starting to come. And for us anyway, I think that the confusion is starting to dissipate, albeit it can get stirred up every now and again.
Well, let's try dispel some of the confusion in terms of the practicality or the usefulness of the grant, because last year we started tracking the numbers, and the drawdown figures were naturally very low because that lead-in time obviously hadn't been allowed, whereas actually now we're starting to see with the latest tranche of data just in the last couple of weeks, approvals are up, but there's still a big disconnect between the grants that are approved and those that are drawn down. Now obviously time is an important consideration there, but for your clients who are going through the process, what kind of success rates do they have in terms of navigating the grants, or would many end up actually having to fund themselves?
Yeah, we'd have a very high success rate with the vacant derelict, you mean? Yeah. So on that side, that's no problem, and also on the one-stop shop, very successful. But again, we would have our own internal process, so we wouldn't be going down that road of applying on somebody's behalf and going through it unless they were well looked after before we got to that point in the road. So yeah, that's a bit of an overview of what our clientele might look like. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm really curious as to the people who are buying properties. Say, are they generally first-time buyers, or are they trading up from another home? The people who are buying.
Yeah, typically first-time buyers, I would say. And of course you get a mix of everything. But typically first-time buyers would be the answer to that. Yeah.
One of the things that I've remarked on recently, almost in another context, but over the last 20 years, I think first-time buyers and people who are trading up or down, they've become more sophisticated buyers, and particularly at the moment now where it's very challenging to buy a home, whether it's one that's ready to walk into, whether it's newly built home, or indeed you're taking on or something that requires work. But we actually have I'm not sure sophisticated the right word, but they're certainly a more knowledgeable buyer because they've really put a lot of work to get them this far. Yeah. So does that make a difference?
Yeah, it does. And I've been seeing that in a number of facets as well. Before even coming to KORE Retrofit, that would have been a bit of the narrative that's out there. My own, I suppose, specialised area of expertise is high performance construction, and in particular passive house. But with regards to all of that, and also the Irish building regulations getting very close to that level of performance, what you're starting to see now is the homeowners and the clients typically maybe sometimes being even more informed than the builder on some things like this, where they've really done this due diligence to a really high level. And that's part of also what we're seeing is, over and above now, you would see costs and stuff and that due diligence part it's been very, very well scrutinised by the clients, and sometimes maybe that's what's accelerating what we're starting to see with retrofit, is that, let's say, the typical rural Ireland sort of son or daughter with a site, maybe what you're starting to see is that the price of building is almost up at $500,000 sort of thing, whereas maybe buying and with the vacant derelict and the one-stop shop, you can be in your first home a lot more affordably than maybe necessarily building. But that's not the full story, Carol, as you know. So that we feel that that's one thing that's sort of starting to come through our pipeline, where we're starting to see, you know, an acceleration in growth now that there has been a consistency and a stable fund there for a period of time. So that's one aspect of the question, but there was another question in that, and I can't remember what.
Well, I also think that maybe you're being very generous to say that maybe the reason people aren't going down the route of self-building is because of the cost. Yes, cost and access to skills and contractors is a big deal, but actually planning obviously remains the single greatest challenge, and it's something that we'd like to see. It's something that we'd like to see change. But can we break down a typical, if there is such a thing, a typical retrofit project? Because one of the points that when I was speaking to Peter Cox and talking about conservation, and one of the points he was very keen to make to me and to make sure was communicated was that actually. We're also, you mentioned a fabric first approach, but actually when we look at an existing home, there is a level to which that can be brought up, and it might not necessarily tally with that of a newly built home. So is there such thing as a typical retrofit in terms of a project approach? And if so, what does that look like? What's on that list?
So here at KORE, we're very cognizant of let's say also say healthy homes. Healthy retrofit, and getting into this situation of being a leader whereby we're avoiding these potential unintended consequences. Across the water in the UK, there's been plenty of issues with early, I suppose, retrofit schemes and pilots and stuff. And thankfully here in Ireland, the SEAI are doing great work as well. So speaking to the Peter Cox of this world and talking about that, the SEAI have a traditional pilot in place at the moment for traditional homes, and ourselves, KORE Retrofit, are a key actor in that, and we've partnered with some friends in the industry, Ecological Building Systems, in particular for that scheme, where we're all working hand in hand. And I think the primary way of me describing that scheme to anyone is you insulate to such a level that it is safe for the building, that you're not creating any sort of unintended consequences. And when I say that, I mean like mold, condensation, these types of horror stories, and that you ventilate accordingly. So whatever is appropriate to get to that level, that's all the insulation that's needed. But the key point being it's an upgrade, it's an improvement on performance, but not putting the building in jeopardy. And then if we step back away from that traditional home pilot, back into the one-stop shop, that's exactly it. So there's a menu available and a specification that's able to be tailored to whatever the destination is. So for some people, we'd have typically people that will come here and they're almost wanting to go to that passive house, that A1. But of course, all you have to meet in the requirement is 100 kilowatts of uplift. So you're typically talking a B3, B2.
I like the concept of healthy homes.
Yeah, so do we. Is
BER the right metric?
It is what we have at the moment. I think it's rudimentary. There's no doubt about that. But it works, and again, it's one of those things. It's only as good as the information that's entered to some degree. But it has its weaknesses. There's no doubt about that. And there is other things there that we would maybe like to see, like the PHPP, the Passive House Planning Package software, which is a glorified Excel. Is much more accurate in terms of breaking that down. But on a lot of our projects, we'd almost be doing dual simulation of both here at KORE Retrofit, and by that gives us an internal confidence to, let's say in what renewable energy is really going to be employed in that project, and also a confidence in the specification as well. So that's something that we're have in-house and feel very strongly about. When
homeowners and would-be homeowners speak to you and your team, what kind of misconceptions do they have around retrofit? Do they also think if we're doing this, we need to be aiming for A1? You know, what are the things that maybe people just aren't getting right?
Yeah, so look, I think the things that would often crop up are, you know, particularly with me, I live in rural North Monaghan. So, for example, there's a lot of hesitation about heat pumps is one of the things. And now we're in a world where we're post-fossil fuel in terms of heating systems. So there's a degree of having to explain all things heat pumps and to also paint a picture about what else has to go hand in hand with that to get that. Also, what's appropriate, is a heat pump actually appropriate? So again, just considering how wide retrofit is, heat pumps won't be the solution in every situation. And then how does that marry up with other technologies and how can they work hand in hand? And we're soon going to be, in the not too distant future, into a world where even the pricing and the way in which electricity in the grid works here, we're going to have dynamic pricing. I think it was due to come in at Halloween 2025, but we're now talking summer 2026 for that, and that will have a huge positive impact on the running costs of heat pumps.
I'm conscious for anybody listening in who is maybe an existing homeowner and they're you know, perhaps nervous about their mortgage as it stands, and are worried about incurring further liability to be able to take on works. In terms of the actual work that you find needs to be done for homeowners, can you take us through what might be involved in a typical retrofit? So, I mean, you talk about a fabric first approach.
Well, there's one wee area just to go back on. The other area that, going back to the previous question, that tends to crop up as well is ventilation and the whole way in which to approach ventilation. So again, in that, how does that work with other fabric measures? That's the other one that would come up. So we can explore that again if we want to. But to build out...
maybe expand on that now, because I think that's an important one. It's one that I see coming up in questions to TikTok videos and in Facebook groups, so we know that that's a key concern. Yeah,
definitely. So for me, in the fabric first approach, you're typically insulating your floors, your walls, your roof, and they're getting a new U value. Depending on what your destination is, A1, B3, the specification of that will go up. Also in that, whenever we're dealing with these U values, we would also maybe have a look at some of the junctions, the key junctions. In particular in retrofit, some junctions or some construction build-ups might need very careful attention. So we call that thermal bridging, or what some people also call in the industry cold bridging. So that's assessed to see, is that an issue. Windows is the next big one, and that brings up another flare topic, which is overheating and the potential for that. So again, if we're involved early enough in KORE Retrofit, we have in-house expertise as well that's able to sort of, direct people around that as well. So that's where the PHPP software comes in. It assesses overheating very successfully. So really what you're trying to do there is limit on the north side of your building windows, because the north side's not going to get any sun. So if you have a big solar expanse on the north side, you're going to hemorrhage heat, and there's nothing really you can do about that, and that can hurt things like a heat pump later on. When then you're looking at the south side of a building, of course you want to let sun in, but you have to be careful not to let too much in, because it's very hard to control then. So that's one of the things. And then the last two things go hand in hand. Air tightness, whatever your level is on that, will have a big impact on what ventilation is appropriate. So again, in our Irish regulations at the moment, we have to get to a certain level of air tightness, and we still have a number of options of ventilation that can be employed. Natural ventilation is one of those, but and then we've got the myriad of different mechanical systems. So it's just about getting all of that right. So in KORE Retrofit, we'd be real leaders in breaking that down for people and putting forward the right systems, so that we don't get this unintended consequences arising.
I want to come back to KORE Retrofit's leadership position and maybe look at some of the schemes you're exploring and some of the new materials you're exploring. But before we do that, you touched on something important there around early engagement. But how early is appropriate? Because I'm conscious, for say, it's one thing for homeowners because they might take time to reflect and work towards this in terms of making a decision when is the right time to retrofit, knowing that it will have to be done. But for people who are exploring a home, so they're still in house hunting mode, still highly competitive, what we're seeing at the moment is anecdotally, estate agents are telling us that the fall through rates are on the increase again, because first time buyers and people trading up and down, there's such a shortage of available properties that they're putting offers and actually going sale agreed on a number of different properties, knowing they can only complete with one or complete on one. So actually anecdotally across the country, fall through rates are increasing. So actually, at what point are people coming to you maybe to get a quote for a home so they know how much they can bid?
Yeah, so very typically they're coming post-purchase. In some cases as well, they'll also have maybe got a scheme done at concept stage from an architect. I'd be encouraging them post-sale, once they own a building, even if they're evaluating a building pre-sale, that's even appropriate to talk to us. The sooner the better. For example, like we've about 500 projects a year going through us at the moment. Hopefully more as time goes on. But if with just even using logic, but that a number of projects going through, you know, across a portfolio like that, the experience just is yielded very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And we have that experience to bring to bear. So you know, the appeal as soon as and you know, you can save money as well, I think, in that as well. I'd be very confident in saying that to people.
Barry, are people realistic about what a retrofit can do to the building?
That's a broad. Yeah, look, we get people that are not realistic at all in terms of some of their ambitions around this, and some people, you know, we have to, I suppose, break it down for them. And some people are oftentimes maybe shocked at the cost that some of this can be. But in other ways as well, there's always ways to box smart within that, as I said. That's where that early engagement really can get a big result as well. Yeah.
Very good. And I'm conscious of time, but you have kind of piqued my interest there in terms of innovation in this space, but also exploring new materials. And I know KORE Retrofit has adopted a leadership position here in I won't just say driving new technologies, but actually exploring potential sustainable materials. So can you talk to us a little bit about maybe the future, what the future might look like in terms of materials?
Yeah, so you'll see here at we've offices here, and just also beside us here we've a big warehouse space as well. And what goes on here is we're part of an EU project. That project's called Circular Reno, Reno being short for renovation. And with that, one of the aspects of it is to employ offsite retrofit. So we make panels here, and they're bespoke from an initial survey, and then when we go out to site with these panels, we're able to employ a quick execution of retrofit in a pre-manufactured way. And then the other aspect of this is to explore the supply chain and how we might employ more bio-based materials into those sorts of panels. And if you look at the policy moves in Europe, it's going to be a thing that, you know, embodied carbon reduction is going to be mandated, and with that, if you have natural based materials, obviously they perform much better than man-made materials. So as times go on, we're looking to diversify, and we're looking to, you know, really lean into that R&D space. And that European project for us so far has been hugely successful, because we're working with another Irish housing association in Tua, and it's a small portfolio of their projects that we're doing this work on, you know, so it's gone very well to date.
That's exciting. So I suppose before we finish up, for people, whether they're sitting in their own home and having this conversation now, or they're in the unfortunate position where they are house hunting and they're stressed on every other different facet, what kind of advice do you have for them? And perhaps that's two different sets of advice.
Well, we work nationwide, and I think you know, we've a great team here, and I think, you know, I have a lot of confidence in them and their technical ability, and also their knowledge about the grant space and everything else. And it sounds a wee bit corny to say, but we are a one-stop shop, and I think the best thing to do is just give us a call. Even if it's a prospective home. We had a call yesterday that's just very fresh in my mind. Again, this homeowner is actually going to be largely based in America with work, but we were able to sit on the Teams and talk for a good half an hour, 45 minutes. I personally sent a follow-up email to her yesterday, and again, very, very grateful of the advice. And it may be a project, may not, we'll see, but that's what we would offer, you know.
So early engagement is key. Very good. And keeping the expectations realistic.
That's it as well. Yeah, I think there has to be cutting the cloth to suit. But again, with the experience we have, I think, you know, we can offer people an awful lot of advice there as well that can still give them, you know, almost 8, 9 out of 10 of what they want. You know, so the trade-off could be very small when it's all broken down.
Very good, Barry. Thank you for taking the time to, first of all, allow us into KORE Retrofit HQ today, but also for breaking that down, because there is confusion there. And I think for people where they're seeing news headlines of, you know, an extra 2 billion in funding available and just wanting to make sure that they are positioning themselves well to be able to avail of that. So thank you so much for doing that. That was Barry McCarron, Managing Director of KORE Retrofit. My thanks as always to show producer Katie Tallon and to the podcast team at Hear Me Roar Media. And thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of Breaking Ground here on iPropertyRadio.com.